So let's begin. Why did I want to do this? Weiser Künstler is such a soulful, kind of curious estate. They are, without a doubt, the insider's winemaker in the Mosel. They are the winemaker's winemaker. Anytime I talk to anyone I seriously respect in the Mosel, so Julian Hart, Vollenweiter, Katharina Prum, and frankly, within Germany, Klaus-Peter Keller was one of the first to put these on my radar. Every winemaker who's serious about German wine talks about Weiser Künstler as one of the inspirations they look toward. The Mosel Fine Wine quote that's on this slide 1 of your Google Earth presentation, I think speaks a lot to what is special about Weiser Künstler. They farm incredibly soulful vineyards, really old vines, and the wines are just magical and really affordable. So that's why I wanted to get into it. They're not easy wines in a lot of ways, and so I'm going to apologize in advance for tripping over myself and my tongue as I kind of try and describe these wines. A lot of the magic, especially of the Grand Crus, is that they don't open themselves to easy interpretations. They speak a language that is kind of beyond our language of easy Riesling descriptors, where you're hooking your hat on fruit and things like this, right? Orchard fruit and stone fruit. They are more complicated than that. Few estates do, certainly in the Mosel, do wines, product wines, off-dry wines, and dry wines with sort of equal aplomb. I think the product wines are in ways more traditional, but still they have this singular kind of Weiser Künstler soulfulness, whether it's a minerality or some expression that is really just their own. And the dry wines, to me, are on their own level, in their own league. Not necessarily better or worse than some of the others, but just absolutely essential and of the earth, and to get into a very kind of mysterious and enigmatic and magical area. I don't want to downplay it. Weiser Künstler has an incredibly strong following, a rabid following in the US. They're incredibly, the word is out on the wines for sure. But I think two things battle against it. One is incredibly small allocations and incredibly small amounts of wine they produce. And the other thing, though, is just the cerebral quality of the wines. There's plenty of wines that have really limited productions that are obsessed with by huge amounts of people and are really, are really easily and rapidly collected. And Weiser Künstler floats a little bit to the left of that. These are difficult wines. They're not necessarily easy wines. And to me, they are among the most cerebral wines of the Mosel, and they're challenging, and they ask more from the participant. And I think a lot of that quality of these wines has kept people a little bit at bay. And so that is really what I wanted to kind of engage with as we go through the line. The pandemic, unfortunately, a lot of restaurants in Europe were closed and or had to pass on allocation. So we took them. So this is very literally, I know all importers and retailers play this kind of allocated game, but the truth of the matter is the only reason we have more this year is because we took all the allocations Weiser Künstler would give us, which was roughly 2 times what we would normally get. So that kind of inspired this, like, we actually have the wines, we can do some justice in getting them out there. So we figured we'll get them out there, and we'll try and do something to bring in the people who are curious about this. All right, we'll do a real quick estate overview here, begin at the beginning. Weiser Künstler is a husband and wife team. That is Alexandra Künstler on the left and Konstantin Weiser on the right. It is really a 100% joint effort. Neither comes from winemaking families. Both have worked at various estates and various roles within winemaking. And I think the story really kind of begins with Konstantin on the right working at Immich Batterieberg. So he was there before Gernot Coleman was there. And if you look in that slide 1, that picture, you can see in the distance there, that little village there, that is Enkir. So that is where the estate of Immich Batterieberg is. And indeed, the Batterieberg, you can't exactly see it. It's kind of hidden behind and underneath those vines on the horizon line there. So Konstantin was working there, and this tiny parcel of vines came available in the Ellergrub. This was 2005. This was literally the spring of 2005. So Alexandra kind of pushes Konstantin to do it. This is singular, you should do it. Konstantin, I think both of them were trepidatious because Ellergrub is unquestionably one of the greatest sites in the Mosel. On the other hand, as we'll get to see it, it is one of the most complex and formidable and intimidating vineyards with all the different terraces and the old vines. So it is an incredible amount of work. There's small yields, and the vineyard was not neglected, but there are very few famous winemakers in the post-war period who were making Ellergrub, which is kind of why it was forgotten. And the reason has to be because it was just so much work. So in this post-war period of mechanization and modernization, vineyards like the Ellergrub would have been overlooked because there's no way to mechanize them, as we'll see. This is a vineyard that has to be treated almost like a garden and completely hand worked. So that's where the kind of story begins. 2005, they take a lease on the Ellergrub, and 2005 in the fall they make the first wine from this site. So we can go then to slide 2, and we're just going to situate ourselves here in Germany. We're going to move to slide 2, and depending on where your Google Earth begins, you're going to kind of come in and see Germany. So there you go. I know for a lot of people in the business, in wine fans, you know where Germany is, and you know where the winemaking regions are. So this is not supposed to be revelatory, but just to provide, to enter as we will. You can slide to slide 3, and we're going to move in closer here. I know a lot of people also know where the Mosel is, but for those of you who don't, we have the kind of anchor there of Frankfurt. So you see Frankfurt on the right, that big city. As you head toward the left, you're going to see Wiesbaden and Ingelheim on Rhine, and then on the left side, Bingen. This is the Rheingau. And as we then move to the left where we have all these blue indicators, this is the Mosel. So we can go ahead and pop to slide 4, and we're going to zoom in. This is where we start getting serious. Here we see the Mosel almost in the full length. Again, your Google Earth, everyone's Google Earth is going to be slightly different, but you should see on the left, Trier. This is to some extent the southern kind of end point of the Mosel. The Mosel indeed starts in the Vosges in Alsace on the west side of the Vosges and flows north into the Rhine. So we're catching it here at Trier, the southernmost journey. And as we go right and kind of up to the upper right-hand corner of the screen, we're traveling basically north, and right around Koblenz, if you can see that in your upper right-hand corner, that marks the end of the Mosel as it dumps into the Rhine. So here we have the Mosel in all its grandeur. Let's move to slide 5. We're zooming in, and now is when we really get into the heart of the matter. So slide 5 now is the middle Mosel, all of it. Not all of it, but the most famous part. So I have that little tag there called the Hollywood Mile. So on your bottom right here, you can see Bernkastel. And as you kind of flow downstream, so heading kind of up and to the left, you come to Grach. Velen is on the left, Zelting is on the right. And then as the Mosel makes that dramatic turn there at Erzig and Erden, you have, the Erziger Wirtsgarten and the Erdener Pralat. This to me is, the most famous, the most recognizable section of the Middle Mosel. It's the Hollywood Mile. It's, it's the sites everyone knows. It probably represents 75%, 70% of the exports from the Mosel to the US are from this really, really famous area. Now we can go to slide 6. We're going to start heading downstream to where Weiser Ku is. Slide 6 is just the sunken Mosel Bridge. A lot of people had heard there's a huge controversy about the Mosel Bridge and should it be done or not. I just like when technology burps a little bit. And so you see the Mosel Bridge. Somehow Google Earth has not figured out how to make the Mosel Bridge appear to be higher and going over the Mosel. Anytime technology fails us, I like to point that out. That is slide 6. And now we're going to move to slide 7, and we're going to kind of enter Traub and Traubach, or we take a 2-dimensional overhead view, and you really see now this stretch on your bottom left. That's the Hollywood Mile. And as the Mosel goes toward the left, you're going to hit Lieser, and then Brauneberg, and then the Piersporter Goldtrochen. So that really is the main area of the Middle Mosel. Now, technically speaking, most people would agree, and this is my belief as well, that the Middle Mosel continues to Enkirch. And so Enkirch is where the Steffensberg is. And so Weiser Ku is completely in the Middle Mosel. I think a lot of the sites have a tremendous amount to do with the Middle Mosel. Other ones don't. We'll kind of discuss this. But technically speaking, Weiser Ku is still in the Middle Mosel. As you can see, they're just a turn or two beyond what we normally kind of consider. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, largely because I don't want to talk for a half hour before we drink any wines or really get into the nitty gritty of this. So we're going to jump ahead to the Steffensberg. So If you do have all your wines with you, now's the time. Grab your Steffensberg. Hopefully you've had it open for a bit, for a few days. But in any event, get the Steffensberg in your glass, because we're gonna jump right into this. Again, as we go through the tasting, I'm gonna have moments where I'm gonna kind of instruct people to really go into things, but go back and forth and taste everything as you will, because that really is where the kind of nuance comes out. All right, John already moved, but we moved then to slide 8. And this is a great perspective. So the town on the left, you can see, depending again on how your Google Earth crops things, is Traben-Trarbach. So on the left side is Trarbach, and on the right side is Traben. They're bridged together, so they're hyphenated together into this one village. And then as you swing down around here, you see this pretty formidable wall of vines. These are the Grand Crus of Weiser Ku. So beginning from the left to the right, you have the Gaispfad, the Ellergrub, and then we go all the way downstream to Steffensberg, to the Enkirch, that village there in the Steffensberg. And you can see right away the dramatically different expositions, right? Gaispfad and Ellergrub are facing west, which makes the Steffensberg this curious little side valley that juts in behind Enkirch, almost perfectly south exposed. So this is one of the riper sites they have. And we're going to talk about this in relationship to a few of the sites, right? Because you have the southern exposition, which makes it considerably warmer. But you also have cold air that's coming in from the forest to the right there. So it has a strong diurnals, and these sort of sites are oftentimes very good for product cut wines or dry wines, because they have this intense warmth during the day and cool temperatures at night. We can move to slide 8, just to give you a little historic reference. This is a Prussian tax map from almost the same perspective that we are looking at, right? So we can see here Traben-Trarbach on the left, and this kind of wall of vines. And you can see all of them in dark red, indicating kind of Grand Cru status. You can see Gaispfad is sort of written to the left, almost floating over the Mosel. Ellergrub you can see to the right. And then as you go down to Enkirch, you can see Steffensberg there. With the maps, I find it really interesting. I love the history and the kind of culture of this. I think these maps indicate a sort of historical importance, and so I want to convey that, and less than I want to hang my hat on the fact that because a map from 1897 says it's great, then it's great, because I don't think that's the case by any means. You can see a number of the sites here on the north side, so the Rispach in Birne there. Those are sites that no one really talks about now, that aren't considered as great, that are considered Grand Cru status. And certainly there's a number of vineyards that we would today easily recognize as profound that are not indicated on these maps at all. So again, I like the history. I think these maps show a sort of like a historical importance and a kind of continuation through the ages. I don't think they just tell you that it's great, so I don't want to convey that. But we see in this both Gaispfad, Ellergrub, and Enkirch all considered kind of Grand Crus. Let's move to slide 10. And now we're going to Google Earth it actually into this vineyard. Steffensberg is one of the kind of original 3 vineyards that Weiser Ku had. It is one of the 3 Grand Crus. Like I said, it's a southern exposition, and we have here weathered slate. So we have gray and blue slate, very weathered, and there's actually a little bit of soil here, right? So humus, they say in German, but what we would say is topsoil. So it is a site that retains a little bit more water. The vines are a little more powerful. There's a little more vigor here. And in general, I would say of the Grand Crus, as you go through them, this tends to be the fruitiest. Now, anytime I talk about any descriptors, fruity, big, finessed, wide, broad, keep in mind I'm talking within the context of Weiser Ku, which is always lithe and leaner and a little more, always smaller scale than nearly anyone else. So when I say biggest and fruitiest, I'm saying this in the context of Weiser Ku. They own about 4 hectares total in the Steffensberg, 0.4, I should say, I'm sorry, so less than half a hectare. Roughly a quarter of it is in the Steffensberg in general. And then another under 0.2 is this Im Löwenbaum. Someone, I think, Jim, you had asked about this. So Im Löwenbaum, we had it labeled on the map, and I took it out for reasons I can't really remember. But the Löwenbaum is a little bit further. It's in that parcel below, in the kind of layer of vines, the lowest terrace there, a little bit to the right. And this is a site, if you want to click back to slide 9, to the Prussian tax map, you're going to see Löwenbaum. Maybe it isn't. I thought it was labeled there. Yeah, it is. There you go. The Löwenbaum. It's hard to read, but it is there. So Löwenbaum especially was a site that has been regarded for over 100 years as one of the special sites. And in the last few years, Weiser Ku has been fermenting this parcel separately and making it its own wine, because it does have a different feel to it, a different architecture to it. So at this point, depending on the vintage, they may blend them together. They may separate them out. The last few vintages, they have separated them out. So you can find a Steffensberg Grand Cru, and you can also find a Steffensberg in Löwenbaum, which is, again, this older parcel. That is slide 10. If you move to slide 11, we're just going to swing around. And now we're kind of looking, what is that? We're looking upstream, and you can see kind of Gaispfad, depending on Ellergrub in the distance. And you see the town of Enkir here, where Imik is. And now if you go to slide 12, we're going to have a photograph at almost this same perspective. And what I like about this photograph is it shows the vigor of these vineyards, right? They're dense canopies, huge leaves, incredibly vibrant green. This site holds more water. Again, I'm talking relative when we get to Gaispfad and Ellergrub. Holds a little more water, so it is the densest, richest, biggest wine that they make of the Grand Crus, at least, right? It tends to be kind of the fruitiest. The wine itself, I mean, put your nose in there and get it going on. This is the part where I begin to like trip over myself, because I have a really hard time kind of describing these wines. For me, the Steffensberg is always the fruitiest, but that said, it's never a kind of exotic. I mean, fruit is always an afterthought for most of the Weiser Ku wines. To me, there's something more in the center that's more essential, more enigmatic, mineral fermentation. Oftentimes the wines, even well into advanced age, have a sense of wine that is just fermented, meaning they have like a sense of grape skins or stock or just saltiness. For people who have tasted barrel samples or wines that are still fermenting or just fermenting, there is something of this kind of like magical essence that Weiser Ku captures in all the wines. Curiously enough, I don't know, to be perfectly honest, if this was a choice that they wanted to make Steffensberg a little bouncier, a little lighter. Of the 3 wines we have, that all 2020 Grand Crus, the Steffensberg is 11.5% alcohol. So it is the lightest. As we go to Gaispfad, it'll be 12, and then Ellergrub 13. So I do think they probably picked this a little bit earlier just to kind of counteract the richness of the wine, or at least the richness it can have. You still get, to me, it's light, but it's really bright and broad and kind of bouncy. There's a lot of citrus fruit, a lot of pith, a lot of salt. It's extremely grippy, kind of drying in it, and it has this slaty minerality, for lack of a better thing. And again, this post-fermentation quality that I just think is incredibly alluring. It's hard to describe, and I know I sound like an idiot describing it, but that's kind of how it goes. Someone was
Stephen, sorry to interrupt. There's a good question about cover crops, which brings up the topic of Weiser Ku and their farming. If you want to go
yeah, sure. Yeah, I saw that. Thank you. Yes, the cover crop, they are going to almost always leave a cover crop. They are farming organic, so they have been farming organic almost since the beginning. They've been certified now for 2 or 3 years, and so they will almost always leave cover crops in sites like this because it's a wetter vineyard. They want to keep the crops to kind of suck up as much water as possible. So absolutely, that is the reason. But with all these things, it's always important to remember things change, right? If it's an incredibly dry vintage, they may do something different. So, that is for sure the case here, but it changes. I'm not going to say always that they do that, but certainly most of the time in the Steffensberg, because it is so vigorous. And again, as we get to Ellergrub and Gaispfad, the differences will become a little more apparent. So of the three, I like to say outrageous and ridiculous things. For those of you who drink Burgundy, Steffensberg is like the Merceau Genevière. It's the most luxurious, the most Baroque, the most kind of lavish and textural. Again, the 20 kind of goes counter to that argument in a lot of ways because it is so light and brisk in this vintage, but oftentimes it can have a little bit of a textural quality to it. So that's the Steffensberg of one of the three Grand Crus. Now we're going to jump back, if we jump forward to 13, and we're going to go back in history a little bit. So we're going to head back to Traben-Traubenbach, because this area of the Mosel is so fascinating. I know we spend almost all of our time, most German wine fanatics spend most of their time dealing with the area from Piersport to kind of Erziger Erden and all these famous sites we know. But the truth of the matter is this little nook where Weiser Künstler is incredibly important to the history of commercial trade in the Mosel. I have read and heard from people that know a lot more than I do that Traben-Traubenbach at the turn of the century, so late 19th, early 20th century, was the second biggest commercial center for wine outside of Bordeaux. So this was an incredibly wealthy, incredibly prosperous town that really kind of commanded the trade of Mosel wine at a time that was the golden era of Mosel wines. This was the wine of fashion. It was the most expensive and kind of coveted wine in the world. People say again and again about how these wines were more expensive than Burgundy, and in certain cases that's true, and in certain cases it's not. To me, that's not wildly interesting, but it was an incredibly important cultural commodity for a lot of Europe, for the UK and the US, and it was centered here. And right ahead of you is the Hotel Bellevue, and it is one of the most important, if not the most important, Jugendstil or Art Nouveau architecture still standing in Traben-Traubenbach. If you go to slide 14, you get a photograph of it with its kind of Art Nouveau and sort of organic motifs. A lot of this time period is the golden heyday of German wines, as I said, of Mosel wines specifically. And a lot of the kind of sentiment, a lot of the aesthetic, a lot of the soul of Weiser Künstler speaks to this time period and comes from this time period. So I do think it's important to sort of recognize the history of this place and this time, and especially this aesthetic, because it was an incredibly special and important time in German wine culture, and specifically Mosel wine culture. And Weiser Künstler really does pull from that. So as much as we don't know about, or we don't recognize these places and these sites compared to the Wählener Sonnener, et cetera, it's incredibly important area and incredibly important to the history of Mosel. So that's slide 14. Let's now skip on in just a few streets down and go to the Weiser Künstler estate. So slide 15. We'll go a little bit more into Weiser Künstler. So there they are, a beautiful kind of blue purple structure there right on town. I spoke a little bit already about what Weiser Künstler is. And again, this is one of those estates, it's so hard to verbalize exactly what it is that makes it special. When you go there, when you taste the wines, when you meet with Alexandra and Constantine, it's immediately apparent, but it is hard to describe. This is a little silly and romantic, but it speaks to something about this estate, that the two last names, Alexandra Künstler in German is artist, and Weiser, Weisheit is wisdom. Weiser is like a sage or someone incredibly knowledgeable, right, or insightful. And so they are the artistic sages. And this does speak a little bit to what this estate is. More importantly, perhaps almost more than any other winemaker that I know of in the Mosel, they think or they function in a way where the vineyards are almost more like gardens. That this is less an estate than it is a home. And even the cellars are less, which we'll see in a minute, are less grandiose and have a kind of domestic feel to it. There's almost no sensibility from anything of this whole estate, including Alexandra and Constantine, that talks about production or just the kind of raw realities of capitalism and commercialism. It is incredibly delicate, soulful place, and everything feels like it comes out of this kind of jewel box. All the wines, the spaces, the way they interact in the world have this kind of sense. I spoke earlier, they are farming organic. They've been certified for a number of years. They enact a lot of tenements of biodynamics. Everything is naturally fermented in the cellars. They don't chaptalize, they don't acidify under any measure. So they really are doing old school farming and winemaking in a way that I think we would kind of expect. If you go to slide 16, it's just a kind of close up here of the estate. I love the the font there. Again, speaking to that turn of the century kind of fin de siècle Gustav Klimt sort of language. I think it's just incredibly beautiful. That little plaque on the right, the Klitzekleine Ring, is a small organization, and it says "Wir retten Steillagen," which means we save steep vineyards. And this is, it's not an unimportant fact, right? A lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of the reasons of a lot of these vineyards that they work were forgotten for almost all of the time after the Second World War, the post-war period, was because this was an age of mechanization. And these sites cannot be worked by machines. It's as simple as that. And so Steillagen, these steep vineyards, were in a crisis. And it is people like Constantine and Alexander who have saved these sites and kind of brought them back. So that's not a small matter. Going to zoom down, slide 17, move into the cellars. Not because they're grandiose, not because they're dramatic or fabulous or kind of some sales piece, but almost exactly the opposite, because they are so humble, so almost domestic. Here you have on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 foeders. So these are the traditional barrels of the Mosel, 1,000 liters. Most of them are 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years old. So they are used again and again. And then on the right, you have stainless steel. In the production, there is no easy recipe. And part of this is just practicality. When you're dealing with such small vineyard parcels and such small quantities of wine, you don't have the luxury to talk about 1,000-liter parcels. Oftentimes, a vineyard site just won't even make 1,000 liters, and so you can't put it in a 1,000-liter barrel. To some extent, when you're working at such a small scale as they are, with as many vineyards as they do, you have to think a little bit more along the lines of Tetris, right? It's where can you fit what to maximum functionality. So that said, they do work under some general rules. For the most part, the Produktcuts, meaning the Cabinet Spätlese Auslese, will see a combination of old wood, foeders on the left, and stainless steel on the right. In vintages that are riper, they're going to be more in stainless steel because that preserves the acidity. In vintages where the acids are super high, they're going to try and put them in more wood, but it is a matter of what they have and what's available. One of the rules, not always again, but oftentimes, the dry wines will be in all wood. Because of the really high levels of acidity, they need that aeration and the exposure in wood barrels to kind of soften and temper the acidity. Most of the time, the larger production wine, like the Feinherb, for example, will be in stainless steel. But again, anytime you make a rule, you're going to break it. And indeed, in 2021, a vineyard with incredibly high acid and very low yields, the basic estate Feinherb is completely an old foeder, both because they needed the foeder to kind of round out the hard edges of the acid, but also because they had the barrels available because the vintage was so low. So that's 17. If you click to slide 18, you're going to see some more barrels. So that is a foeder. That is, in fact, the basic estate wine of vintage 17. So the Riesling Weiser Künstler. You'll see it's in a foeder. And then you see these smaller barrels to the left and the right. Steffensberg 16, I think that's, can't quite see. Gaispfad 19 there on the right. These are 500-liter barrels and barriques, which they will use almost exclusively for the Grand Crus. They're old barrels, so certainly when you're saying barrique, they're going for no wood, obviously. The realities here are twofold. One, they want this extreme lees contact, they want the aeration, but they also oftentimes just aren't making 1,000 liters of these wines. And so you can't put it into a foeder. It's as simple as that. Most of the Grand Crus that we're going to talk tonight come in some mix of foeder, mostly 500-liter and 300-liter barrels. That is in the cellars. Now we take a quick little tour through the vineyards. Let's go to slide 19. And we're back up now to our 2D look, looking straight down on this part, this kind of cool little patch of the Middle Mosel. They are farming in total after they started in 05, so they're coming up on their 20th anniversary. One of the things I appreciate most about this estate is the fact that they have not grown much. They are successful enough to easily sell wines from twice the amount of hectares that they farm, but after nearly 20 years, they are only farming 4.5 hectares, so less than 4.5 hectares in total, really. They are a true micro estate in the way that very, very few others. JJ Prune, which is an estate, Katerina is a good friend, I love the wines. They farm, I think, over 5 hectares of the Veltliner Sonnenur alone, just to give some perspective. So JJ Prune has 5 hectares or more of the Veltliner Sonnenur. Weiser Ku in total is less than 4.5 hectares. So it really is an incredibly small scale production. Let's move upstream and check this out now. We're going to go through the lineup of wines. So people who have other things open than the 3 Grand Crus, we're going to kind of slide through the entire portfolio. This is their one site in Wolf. And Wolf is a town, a village made famous by their good friend Daniel Vollenweiter, who has 2 sites here, the Goldgrube and Steffensberg, which you can't see from this perspective. These 2 sites would be on the near side of the river here, kind of right under us if we were in this magical drone. So we are looking now behind the village of Wolf into this little side valley, into the Wolfer Sonnenlei. This is one of their newer sites. So I think they started working with this around 2015. They have roughly half a hectare here in the Wolfer Sonnenlei. The vines are about 50 years old, roughly half of them grafted, half of them ungrafted. It's curious, you hear the things that winemakers say. So I've been in this vineyard a number of times. This doesn't quite give full notice to how steep the vineyard is. Indeed, it's actually pretty dramatic when you're in it, but it's the quietest vineyard they farm. And for a lot of the sites, as dramatic and as beautiful and kind of spectacular as they are on a long road. So you do have the kind of constant bustle of traffic below. And when you're deep in the Wolfer Sonnenlei, it is a quiet vineyard. You look across to the other side of the valley of forest, and it's a really kind of peaceful vineyard. From an exposition site, we are looking almost directly south. So this has, very much like the Steffensberg, a similar exposition. It is one of the warmer sites. And because of this, it is a warm site, but just like the Steffensberg, you can see as you kind of look up into the valley, it turns into a forest and kind of goes up there. So you have a lot of cool air coming down through the forest, down through this little valley. So you have really high diurnal shifts, again, warm days, really cold nights. And this, to Constantine, is one of like the great cabinet vineyards they have. So almost always this is a cabinet wine. I think they've made a cabinet Trocken from it, if I remember correctly. While Constantine thinks it's one of the great cabinet vineyards for them, they've also made a Spätlese from it, which I thought was spectacular. To me, it falls somewhere in that category. Of all the vineyards they farm, to me, this is the most Middle Mosel. And when I say that, I mean the wines from the Wolfer Sonnenlei have something about their architecture and their kind of serpentine acidity that reminds me of the wines, for example, of JJ Prune or Willie Schaefer or any of the kind of other great names that we might know a little more in the Middle Mosel. Whereas when we get into the other, excuse me, the other Grand Crus, the architecture is something so different. So this is the Wolfer Sonnenlei. We move now, and we're going to go back downstream. And this is a really curious little area here that we're going to delve into, and it's complicated, but I think we can all handle it. So we are now looking at Trabach. So behind us is the estate of Weiser Ku, and Traben is kind of right under us. So this is another one of these side valleys. And on the left, you see the Trabacher Schlossberg. This is a site they got in 2016, and they blended it into other wines, just kind of learning the voices and how to work the vineyard. 2018 was the first time they made a single vineyard from it. It's about 0.6 hectares, so roughly, more than half a hectare, but about that. These sites, this site specifically is blue slate. And so again, it's most often used for Cabernet or for Spätlese. That it's a product cut wine. Now the vineyard I don't have listed, which I should, but they don't make a single vineyard from it. So I didn't want to get too into the weeds, but you can't ignore it because it's actually one of the most important vineyards they have. So if you kind of fall down the Schlossberg into the town of Traumbach there, and you start climbing up the other side of the valley, you see these vineyards on the right side. Parts of this are called the Taubenhaus. And this, in fact, they have about 0.7 hectare in this vineyard. It is the second biggest holding in any single vineyard they have other than the Ellergrub. So it's an incredibly important vineyard for them, and it's really unique. Both the Schlossberg and the Taubenhaus on the right side are among the wetter vineyards they have. And as we go into climate change with more severe summers and more drought, these wetter vineyards are getting better and better in terms of handling these droughts. You have the rich forests over them that provide hold a lot of water and then release it a little more temperately. So both Schlossberg and Taubenhaus are incredibly important for this new kind of era. The other thing that's really important about Taubenhaus is it has an easterly exposure. It's I believe it's their only vineyard that faces almost directly east. So it is among the cooler vineyards they have, one of the coolest vineyards they have, because it only gets the morning sun, and then after that it's in the shadows. So it makes bracing wine. It has blue slate, it has older vines. Some of the oldest vines are around 40 to 50 years old, so not as old as the Grand Crus, but still, this is a very serious site. And this is what they blend into their basic estate wine. So this makes the estate Feinherb, the one with the owl label in blue. This comes largely from Taubenhaus. So it's a really important vineyard. They also make the Traumbach or a village level dry, if you've seen that. Very limited production line, so maybe you haven't, but that also comes from Taubenhaus. But really its kind of primary purpose is as the base wine for the village off dry. In certain vineyards, in certain vintages rather, they will also take a little bit from the Sonnenlei and a little bit then from the Steffensberg. They have an organic grower that they buy some fruit. So that is the Taubenhaus on the right, not labeled because they don't make a single vineyard wine from it, but at 0.7 hectares, almost 3/4 of a hectare, it is one of their largest holdings and a really important site for them. All right, let's get down to the big boys here. All right, let's move to slide 22. So if you have the Gaispfad, get into it. Hopefully you've had it open, but put your nose into it, move it around, come from the Steffensberg to the Gaispfad. We are now, slide 22, we're kind of looking at this formidable wall of wines. This is that dramatic slope I was talking to at the beginning. This is really the kind of heart and soul, certainly the beginning of Weiser Ku, but still this is what the reputation was founded on and what kind of retains it. Gaispfad, we'll see some photos in a minute. They have about 0.6 hectare of Gaispfad, so they actually do have a decent holdings in Gaispfad. It is roughly contiguous with the Ellergrub, so when you look to the left, you can see Ellergrub there. So Gaispfad almost abuts next to it. Gray slate that then has just a weird, intense pocket of iron. So it's a much more iron-rich, sort of red slate-like site. And here you have 80-year-old and older ungrafted vines. So we now really get into the serious like old vines here. This is Gaispfad. If you want to go to slide 23, it's a photograph of the site. As jutting and kind of crazy as the Ellergrub is, the Gaispfad is basically a rectangle. This photograph doesn't do it justice how steep it is, but it is an incredibly steep single parcel of old vines. You can see at the bottom of that the wall made out of slate, a little bit maybe the red nature of the soil type, and it is just this iron. Honestly, to me, this is Gaispfad is always one of the most curious wines they make. You know, whether it's knowing that it has iron that you then all of a sudden get this kind of like rusty, metallic, dark minerality to it, I don't know. But this is a wine that time and time again, I come back to as among the most mysterious. We probably don't have the time, it's getting already too late, but Weiser Künstler is a little bit of the new school in terms of how they label the wines, meaning the 3 Grand Crus, if you've seen them, they just put the name of the vineyard site. So it doesn't say Riesling and it doesn't say dry. And this is how the direction of wine labeling in Germany is going. Unless it says Cabernet Spätlese or Auslese on the label, it is probably dry. And it either refers to the estate, to the appellation, so Moselle, or one of the villages, they make a Trabacher dry, or to the single vineyard parcel. And just like Musigny doesn't say it's Pinot Noir, doesn't say it's dry, this is going to happen more and more in German wine. And in fact, it's largely how it was before the 2 world wars. So the wines from around the time of Weiser Künstler's Traubentrauben's kind of golden era would have been labeled this way. That said, Weiser Künstler does make a Cabernet Trocken. So again, every rule I make up will be broken at some point. They do make 2 dry wines from this, the Grand Cru Gaispfad, which you have in your glass, perhaps, and then a Gaispfad Cabernet Trocken, which is just picked a little bit earlier, but has, to me, it's not a question of better or worse. It is just a difference in architecture, a difference in style, a difference in immediacy. So this is the Gaispfad Grand Cru you have. This is where I don't have the words for it. And this, to me, is what makes these kind of wines so intriguing, is that the words are hard to come up with. Again, Gaispfad to me is just one of the most special wines in the Mosel and has an incredibly singular, incredibly unique mineral quality to it. I always get like blueberries, alpine strawberries, quinine, herbal qualities, tulip stalks. There's a florality there. There's all these things that are there and then are gone. All of the wines are profoundly salty. There's almost like a sea salt flake quality to the wine. This is the reason these wines are so daunting, is because they're not easy. But every time I go, I get more and I come back. And more than any other wine I import, these are wines I literally will taste over 3 to 4 to 5 days and longer, because they keep evolving and they keep giving things. Never in any kind of grand show, but they always kind of give things. All right, pour the Ellergrub if you got it. We're gonna slide downstream. The last photo here, slide 24, is just of the Gaispfad steps. Again, just gives you a little sense of the verticality, but doesn't do it justice. And then slide 25, we move down to the Ellergrub. And here you get a little bit of a sense. Google Earth is great in certain ways and less great in others, but as uniform in basically a wall of vines as Gaispfad is, Ellergrub is exactly the opposite. Ellergrub is the ultimate riddle. It's the ultimate winemaker's challenge. I have to believe that the angular jutting terraces, the complexity of this site is why many winemakers just did not work it, because you are not dealing with one vineyard. You are dealing with 20 little vineyards and 20 different microclimates, right? This is a riddle you truly have to work and have to be incredibly thoughtful and incredibly present to know how it evolves and how it changes. Ellergrub, we can go to slide 26. It just gives you another, as you move in, you get a little bit more of a perspective of these different terraces and how they jut out. You can see the hut there. That first photograph of Konstantin and Alexandra kind of sipping tea, this was taken there. So this is a place they kind of relax during work and where we sometimes have lunch and drinks. It's an incredibly beautiful space. But this just gives you a little bit of a sense of the site. If you want to click through the remaining slides, they're photographs that none of them do it justice. 27 just gives you a little bit of sense of the different terraces. 28 gives you a little bit of a panorama. You can see here again in 28 the hut there, and then you see below the hut and to the left this kind of dramatic terrace here, and below that this huge kind of gray wall, this slate terrace. This is Alexandra's terrace. So the story goes, when they started, this was an incredible challenge to take this up and to work this vineyard. And Constantine at a certain point in this second year was just exhausted and said, listen, we'll deal with this terrace next year. There's just too much work to do. And Alexandra said, nope, this is a beautiful terrace. We're going to work it. So she went up and single-handedly took care of it, that vineyard, that vintage. And now this is Alexandra's terrace. If you look at, you kind of walk to the left of that hypothetically, that sheer rock face of slate is I don't know, somewhere around 30, 40 feet. So it is, if you were to fall off that, it would not be a good thing. This is, of all the vineyards I take people into, this is the vineyard that people think is cool until you get up and onto some of these terraces. And then those with either a little bit of vertigo or fear of heights, it is an intimidating site. And it is, again, a site that is just 1,000 sites in one. They own 1.8 hectares, as I said. And because it has so many different microclimates, they can make almost anything from this, and they do. So in perfect vintages, they will make a Cabernet, a Spätlese, an Auslese gold capsule. They've made a BA from it, probably made a TBA from it, though I can't, off the top of my head, come up with one. And they make this incredible dry wine from it. So it kind of can do anything, but I think it is one of the most complex vineyards in the Mosel in general. And you can kind of see that in 28, all these different terraces that are ripening at slightly different times, that have different expositions and different kind of qualities to them. If you go to slide 29, just a few beautiful shots. This is the vineyard I go into, and I've been into it 1,000 times. And every time I go, I try and take more photographs because it's just so stunning. And you want to try and capture something of what this vineyard is like when you're in it. And you fail, but you keep trying. So here are some of the stone terraces with the gray slate, a little bit of iron you can see oxidizing there, these little succulents that are just beautiful. Slide 30 is another just kind of crazy little facet of the Ellergrub. These are wild strawberries that grow all over the Ellergrub. They are just my fingers there for scale. They're incredibly tiny. Taste-wise, they're just kind of buoyant and sort of pop in your mouth. They're very good, but they are incredibly fragrant. So when you walk through the vineyard in June, these things are everywhere, and you smell them along with the slate and the salt and the fruit. It's a magical place to be. You can flip through 31 and 32, just kind of giving you different expositions and different shots of the Ellergrub. So put your head into it. The Ellergrub and the Gaispfad, two of these sites that are on the western side that have this western exposition, are technically part of the Middle Mosel, as I've said. But a lot of people, a lot of scholars and tasters find a different kind of architecture in these wines. And I think this is true. A lot of people have said these wines have more to do in their architecture and in their biting acidity, a little bit more to do with Czar wines. And I think that is true. There's something, I talked about the Wolfer Son-in-Law being a wine that has the most common architecture, that's kind of serpentine smooth acidity, similar to the Middle Mosel wines of Weiser Ku, of Willi Schaefer or J.J. Prum. And Gaispfad and Ellergrub to me are nothing like it. They are Middle Mosel by geography, but stylistically they are on their own. And I don't know how to describe this other than an incredibly brisk acidity. I think I find them always very incisive, very deep, very penetrating wines. They just kind of go down, down, down on your palate, but they're not sharp in the traditional way that a high acid wine would kind of feel gripping or cutting. They feel polished somehow. It's like as if they have the acid of the Czar, yet are polished down to something smooth, right? Like a knife being polished almost into something completely semicircle, like somehow sculptural. The wines are beyond words in a lot of ways, and they are complex and they are confusing. And as I give tasting notes, I'm sure more and more of you are yawning because it's just like these are things that are beyond words. It's like trying to describe beauty. It's like you see it, you know it, but words make it seem a little sillier. I'll finish here and we can open up to some questions. I know I'm like right on time, but I wanted to finish with one completely ludicrous idea that I have, a construct I have when I philosophically think about great wines. And I call it the circle of life, Riesling, and profundity. Now I want to imagine in front of you like a circle, right? Like the face of a clock. And when something begins, so it's 6 o'clock, right? Right at the bottom of the circle, it's the most basic thing, right? Where wine begins, it is water. It comes from the ground, it goes into the grapes, it is water, and it changes into something. And as it ripens and it heads towards kind of 9 o'clock and then 12 o'clock being the other side of the circle, this is wine at its winiest, right? Fruit, the citrus, the stone fruit, all the things that we easily hang our hat on. This is to some extent spoofy wine. It's the wine that just is like in your face and shouts at you about what it is and how it is. And oftentimes it's pleasant because they're easy to understand and they're right there, right? It's like the teenager yelling at you about what it is. And then as you move through that circle, you come past 12 o'clock at the top, you come towards 3, 4, 5, and you head back to the beginning, back to almost 6 o'clock, back to the bottom. And this is where it gets back to almost water. It is not water, but it is no longer shouting. It has this mineral quality. It has something that is almost the beginning, something so essential, so compact, so primal, yet changed completely. And that is where, for me, that is where Weiser Künstler is. And that's the complexity of them and the difficulty, but on the other hand, like the wonder, the charm, and the magic. So I will draw this thing so you can see it and mock me in the future about it. But I think it's an interesting way to think about wine. And I think for a lot of the greatest wines like Chablis and Champagne, to me, two regions that have so much to do with Mosel wine, it's similar. The greatest Champagnes and the greatest Chablis are not the ones that smack you over the head with fruit. They're the ones that show return to the soil in a way that these wines do. That is the Weiser Künstler Grand Cru Masterclass. John, are there any questions that came up that we can address? I want to thank people for their time who have to go. I know it's like a Wednesday and it's been 2 years of the pandemic. We're all incredibly tired of Zoom calls. But I wanted to share these wines. I wanted to talk about it. And I'm so thankful and appreciative for everyone's time. We're going to put this up online, so it will be around. You'll be able to Zoom through it. But I really, just deeply appreciate everyone at Von Boden. We so appreciate all the support. If you guys have any questions, we try to grow in the way that Weiser Künstler grows. They are a kind of model for us. So we will try to remain small, and anyone that emails me, we're going to email you back because we really appreciate it. So if there's questions, let me know. Otherwise, we do have some of these wines around. Most of them are kind of sold to either distributors or retail or restaurant partners, but we can put people in touch because we really do, with this like windfall in 2020, we want to kind of spread the word of these special wines because Weiser Künstler deserves wider recognition. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time.